Welcome to the Virtual Sangha podcast from virtualsangha.org. Looking to learn more about Buddhism and connect with friends on the path? Or maybe you're an experienced practitioner and you enjoy keeping a beginner's mind. Wherever you're at in your journey, you're invited to visit virtualsangha.org to browse our resources there and connect with our supportive and inclusive community on Discord. Find the link in the show notes for more information. And now, on with the show.
I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Buddham Saranam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. Dhammam Saranam Gacchami. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. Sangham Saranam Gacchami. Homage to the Blessed One, the Exalted One, the fully enlightened Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa.
Okay, thank you all for joining me. This week, we are talking about the great disciples of the Buddha and getting into the section that lists all of the women disciples. Before we get into this discussion, I want to address what might be like an elephant in the room, which is that a lot of these stories of women as disciples of the Buddha have a lot of misogynist or sexist themes. And I'm not going to focus on those too much today. And it's not because I'm trying to sweep anything under the rug or ignore it at all. That's why I'm giving this acknowledgement. But I don't want that discussion of those problematic aspects to drown out this opportunity that we have to celebrate what I call the matriarchs of our practice, the women who have contributed to the Sangha over time. So in this section, we see women appearing as patrons or matrons, perhaps, teachers, protectors of the Sangha, even stream enterers and arahants. And this, even though a lot of the representation of women, especially in the early Buddhist texts, are have problematic aspects, it is still worth noting that this is coming from, scripture that is 2,500 years old, and that women are presented as capable of attaining the highest fruits of the practice. So all that other stuff, you know, take it or leave it or analyze it or whatever. The bottom line is that we are being shown here that women are capable of attaining the highest fruit of practice. And for that to arise, I want to say from, the world back then, but I mean, the world today is still um, riddled with misogyny and sexism. Um, it says a lot. And I hope that we can, focus on that fundamental equality, despite how much effort there has obviously been to maintain patriarchy and all of that. At the end of the day, all people are possessing that Buddha nature, that potential for awakening, the potential to be stream enterers and arhats. So the first example that I want to look at is Visakha. who is the Buddha's chief patroness. And it would be easy to describe her simply as a wealthy donor, but her role goes much further than that. She feeds monastics, provides them with robes and medicine. She builds a monastery. And most importantly, she really pays close attention to the needs of the community. She notices that newly arrived monks are tired from their travels. They're unfamiliar with the city. They don't have connections. They don't have resources. She sees that there are sick monks and that their attendants also need food and medicine. If you're trying to do alms rounds for yourself while also taking care of another sick monk, then you're being doubly taxed and not doubly supported. She recognizes that nuns need special considerations for bathing robes, for example. And she even challenges a practice of refusing ordination during the rains retreats, arguing that there should be no season when the Dharma cannot be followed. So she's questioning the way things are done. She's finding new ways that things should be done. And she shows us that protecting the Sangha is often very practical and is asking questions like what is preventing people from practicing and what hardships are we making worse by maintaining the rules the way they are? What can be changed? So her executive leadership here is really incredible. She explains that generosity supports our own development, remembering that the gifts that she gives helps others. It gives rise to gladness, tranquility, concentration, and the factors of awakening. So by creating these opportunities for others to contribute to the Dharma, she's creating opportunities for them to gain in the benefits of generosity. We in the virtual Sangha just did a fundraiser to purchase new speakers and microphones for the temple in Pearland, Texas. And the nun who received it, Sister Fatlan, she was very grateful. And everybody who contributed to that has this sort of encouraging benefit in their mind that every time the temple uses that equipment that we donated, that it's like being a shareholder in the merit, so to speak. It's this sense of satisfaction and encouragement and connection of knowing that when other people benefit from it, that you helped contribute to that. So the next character when it comes to this kind of patronage is Queen Malika. She gives generously, builds a hall for Dharma discussions, and uses her influence with the king. When priests persuade the king to sacrifice animals and human beings because of the king's frightening dreams, Malika urges him to consult the Buddha. And because of that influence, the what would have been victims of these sacrifices are eventually released. And that's just one small example of Malika's positive influence. So her support is not only financial, but she helps to bring Buddhist ethics into a more political or power dynamic kind of situation. And speaking of power, there's an aspect of the church that I was raised with, and I won't get into a whole lot of details about, non-Buddhist religions, but one of the principles in the church that I was raised with was that women should be silent in the congregation, and I'm not exaggerating when I said that if a woman were to speak in front of the congregation, that she was required to first declare to the congregation that she had her husband's permission to speak. And this is, modern day United States of America. Um, so personally, because of my past and experiences, really take a lot of pleasure in seeing women as teachers, you know, because the misogyny didn't go away 2,500 years ago, And it's not like we live in a really enlightened society now where we can look down our noses at old ways of doing things. Like a lot of those oppressive ways of doing things are still with us. And even for people today, seeing a female teacher from the past could be something that is inspiring, shocking, what have you. So, women as teachers is something that I very much celebrate. So, Kema, foremost among the nuns in wisdom, is approached by King Pasenadi with difficult questions about the fate of a liberated person after death. And she gives some answers that are very precise. What happens after death? Do they exist? Do they not exist? Do they both exist and not exist? Do they neither exist nor not exist? And she answers each of those questions very precisely. And the king later asks the Buddha the same questions, and the Buddha gives an identical response to what Kema gave. So Kema is not somebody who's just entrusted with a simplified version of the teachings or a lesser version of the teachings. She roars her lion's roar, so to speak. She speaks with the genuine doctrinal authority that is identical to the words of the Buddha. Bada offers a different example. She begins as a wandering ascetic and a skilled debater. And when encountering the Dharma, she attains arhatship and spends decades traveling and teaching others. We also see women teaching other women. Sona remembers receiving instruction from a bhikkhuni on the aggregates, sense bases, and elements. The bhikkhuni Sangha is shown as not just a community that is receiving teachings from monks, but as a community with its own teachers, mentors, and realized elders. This chapter gives us many examples of women attaining stream entry. Visakha reaches stream entry early on in her life together with her personal attendants. Kema attains stream entry and then later full liberation. Nanda reaches stream entry after confronting the impermanence of physical form. Kisa Gotami's story is especially dramatic. After her child dies, she goes from house to house seeking medicine. The Buddha tells her to bring a mustard seed from a home where no one has ever died. She finds mustard seeds everywhere, but no household has been untouched by death. Through that journey, she realizes that her grief is personal, but not unique. Death enters every family. Her experience prepares her to understand the Dharma, and she attains stream entry. Later, while watching the flame of an oil lamp rise and go out, she contemplates the arising and cessation and attains arhatship. The arhats in this section reach liberation through a variety of different paths. So, Kema through wisdom, Bada through searching and understanding, Kisagotami through grief transformed into insight, Nanda through overcoming attachment to beauty, and Sona through determined effort even later in life. Sona raised 10 children and gave her wealth to them, but she was then treated as a burden. She thought that basically sponsoring her children in early life would earn her a comfortable retirement in which she would be cared for by her children. So even after ordaining, she discovers that the change of her surroundings did not immediately change her mental and emotional state. And she practices with greater urgency. And one day, while being left to boil some water, she sits down and sees impermanence and aggregates, suffering, gains insight into non self, and attains arhatship. Her awakening happens during an ordinary chore that becomes this insightful moment. She is older, she's carrying pain from family life and still struggling with the training, but none of that obscures or obstructs her liberation. So, taken together, all these stories show that there's not just a single, s- uh, type of person. that is suited to awakening. You don't have to be a male, you don't have to be the firstborn, you don't have to come from a rich family, you don't have to be young. A great variety of people are shown approaching the path and attaining the higher fruits. There are queens, poor women, mothers, widows, intellectuals, patrons, elderly practitioner, and they do not merely support the arhats. They don't just have a place in the Sangha, they become arhats and become leaders and teachers within the Sangha. So, what I'd like to wrap up my portion of the sharing with for today, and I invite anybody who has any other thoughts to join in afterwards, is something that I put together for a class of the Dharma Teacher Orders Buddha Dharma Studies Institute, when I was giving a presentation on the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra, and I was talking about um, the role of lay people and gender as it is presented in the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra. Just to give a super quick summary, the Arhat Ananda is, or is it Shariputra? Sorry, I may be misremembering which of the venerables is present in this story in the Vimalakirti Nirdesa Sutra. Um, but anyway, this venerable monk has an encounter with a goddess, and they start having a conversation about gender, and the goddess magically changes the elder monk's gender, and swaps bodies with him. So now the goddess is in the form of a venerable monk, and the venerable monk is in the form of a goddess. And the goddess asks the monk, where has your gender gone? Basically, can you find the essence of gender now? And the final conclusion of that exchange is that all phenomena have neither male nor female gender. And it's an interesting point, and there's a whole lot more we could go into on that particular exchange. But at the end of the presentation, I felt it was appropriate to give respect and salutation to the women who have supported my practice through the years. So I'm going to share something on the screen that I know will not be of much benefit to anybody who's just listening on the podcast. Maybe I'll find a way to share the pictures, but on the screen is a photo of Navy Lieutenant Janet Shin. She was the only Buddhist chaplain in maybe the military, but definitely the Navy. And um, I was curious about Eastern philosophy before I joined the Navy. There was a local college radio station that would sometimes play Alan Watts on the off hours, so like the wee hours of the morning. There might have been some Alan Watts playing on an FM radio, and I was enjoying some kolaches from a nearby bakery and listening to Alan Watts. That was kind of my morning routine for a while, and that really got me interested in Eastern philosophy. But I had already, decided to join the Navy and go that route. But while I was in, I took advantage of traveling and being exposed to things I would not have discovered in my hometown. And it just so happened that I got stationed on a ship that was a kind of a small ship. It was a cruiser. And on that ship was this Navy chaplain. And the odds of that are extremely low. Like, might as well have just bought a lottery ticket and won. And that was my first encounter with somebody who was, actually a Buddhist and could really teach me something. So, yeah, I cannot overstate the preciousness of that encounter and what she taught me, and the wholesome seeds that she both planted and watered in my practice um, changed my life. I really owe everything to Lieutenant Shin. After Lieutenant Shin, my Dharma study and practice was mostly self-directed because she moved on to her next duty station. I got deployed, sailed from California to Africa and back, and got to visit some temples in Southeast Asia along the way during port stops there. But being out at sea, I didn't really have a Sangha community to practice with. Um, some of the books that I was reading were from Reverend Master G.U. Kennett. She was the first female Roshi to be ordained in the Japanese Soto tradition to teach Zen to a Western audience. Her books, Roaring Tigress and Selling Water by the River, were extremely influential in my formative early years as a student of the Dharma. I feel very lucky to have so much of my early path to have been influenced by and exposed to women who were firsts at things. So being the first female um, teacher of a lineage, or being the first Buddhist chaplain in the Navy. Um, I think that has affected me in some ways about the way I see us taking our practice into places where it hasn't been before, or maybe in places where we would not have necessarily been welcomed. And a lot of that is influencing how I do things with the virtual Sangha. That despite being in a place and being in conditions that are not favorable to us, I and we are pushing to cr- make the way smooth for our friends in the path who would walk with us. So, another extremely influential figure in my personal journey has been the Zen priestess Domio Burke. She is a living teacher who I'm still learning from, and is in many ways a role model that I strive to imitate. She is the founder of the Brightway Zen Sangha, and her podcast, website, and Zoom organization that she calls her Cloud Zendo are all very inspiring to me. So check out the zenstudiespodcast.com to learn more about the Cloud Zendo and everything that they're doing there. So I'm a huge fan of Domio Burke, and I had been a fan of hers for maybe a year or so before I found out that her lineage is the same Dharma Cloud Soto Zen lineage as Reverend Master G.U. Kennett. So it was just a pure coincidence that I had been reading G.U. Kennett's books, and then years later found a podcast and was really enjoying listening to that podcast. And then that podcaster mentioned that G.U. Kennett was her Dharma grandmother. So huge, huge, huge um, lightning bolt of a coincidence, and that the karmic connections there. I don't know what they are, but I'm extremely grateful that they exist. So, as much as I was influenced and supported impersonally and remotely by the literature and teachings of that Soto Zen lineage, and that early influence from Chaplain Shin, I still had not found an in-person sangha that I could call home. And partly was because I was moving around so much, I didn't really have a home, so to speak. But I met a Vajrayana teacher and dabbled in Lojong for a little bit. But that's a different story for a different adventure. But while I was then looking for some community to really call home, um, I discovered the Dharma Spring Temple, in Pearland, Texas. And the suttas say that good spiritual friendship is the entire holy life. And I know that I have found that thanks to Sister Phap Lang and her generosity with her time and attention, a lot of which was about introducing me to the Dharma teacher order and the class that I'm in now. I'm entering my fourth year as a student there. Even though I've known Fapline much longer than that, but their course has only been available online for about 4 years. So the first year that that course was available online was when I started taking it. But anyway, um, the Dharma Teacher Order and its administration is led by an amazing woman named Elena Bravo Cruz, and the leadership of Elena, the friendship and the spiritual big sister energy of Fatlan, and all of my classmates who are all kinds of different people and are far too numerous to name all of them, but I'm very grateful for the friends, male and female, of and classmates that I've met through the DTO and the BSI class. So all of my Dharma siblings, brothers and sisters alike, have been extremely supportive and beneficial for my practice. So from way back when to today, my story and my practice with the Dharma could not be told without giving much respect and acknowledgement to the women who follow in the footsteps of the disciples and the women that we mention today in this chapter. So I give much thanks and homage to all of them. And if you're here with me in Discord and you have any reflections you'd like to share, either on the text or on influential women who have been part of your life or your practice, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be Buddhist related. It could be, a teacher, a parent, a sibling, whatever, in whatever way those people have helped you to become, the best version of who you are today. If you feel like giving any acknowledgement or shout out to that, either in the written chat or by unmuting your microphone, that would certainly be welcome. So for now, I'm going to take a few mindful breaths while I open up the floor to anybody who'd like to contribute.
I suppose I can talk a little about some stuff that's not necessarily in my own tradition, but more in my neck of the woods. So I'm sure many of you, or maybe none of you, have heard about Sravasti Abbey and Thubten Chodron. Thubten Chodron is I really appreciate her writings. I think you could probably go to her site and see the whole path. Granted, I don't know how it would work taking her as a direct guru. Probably wouldn't, but regardless, there's also Sravasti Abbey, and they have a YouTube channel in which they do present more traditional teachings, right? Like from traditional texts or regular teaching cycles you would find in a monastery. But there's also plenty of really practical advice, and it's interesting how you can see this shift, at least in the Vajrayana community, where it seems that people are looking to hear, more practical advice about their day to day, or I guess more mundane teachings, honestly, because it's very easy in the Vajrayana tradition for things to get very esoteric and very out there. I'm sure anybody who talks to me knows that I'm usually head in the clouds, not involved in worldly affairs, and if I am, it's really strange. Uh, but I just wanted to comment on how important both of these resources have been. Thubten Children and Sravasti Abbey, the nuns there. You can get. I'm not going to say you get answers to any question you have, but I think if you haven't listened to the lectures, these women both, they're very young women, younger than I am, probably younger than a lot of people here, and women, who are getting into their 70s, 80s, and 90s, all teaching. And it's really, really awesome to see. And they seem to have a lot of good programs. And they have education program. Uh, but these Saraswati Happy and Thubten Shudder have been very important to my own spiritual development. And often what I hear from them is enough to make me lean more towards the Gillig path than what I'm currently on. But anyway, uh, there's my there's my 2 cents.
Thank you for contributing that. I'll be sure to include a shout out to them in the show notes for the podcast. And yeah, there have been other teachers, authors, women that I didn't get a chance to mention, but um, I am very grateful that we have so many nuns and lay women as teachers. Um, and I'm grateful to Ty, Venerable Ty, for elevating women in leadership positions in our temple and in our lineage. I think that there is a sort of attrition that can happen when, technically women are allowed to be leaders, but if the leaders who are appointing the leaders never pick women to be teachers, then they disappear. And the fact that in some Buddhist communities, they don't have nuns at all, they don't have women in leadership positions, I think is a testament to that. And so the way that we have more equality and more women in leadership positions is that we continue to support and recognize and name and honor the women that are teaching today. So with that, I will close out and share the merit.
Reciting the sutras, practicing the way of awareness, gives rise to benefits without limit. We vow to share the fruits with all beings. We vow to offer tribute to parents, teachers, friends, and numerous beings who give guidance and support along the path.